Hello everyone, welcome back. In our previous lecture, we learned how the spinal cord acts as an intelligent processing center. We discussed sensory neurons, interneurons, motor neurons, alpha and gamma motor neurons, and saw how the spinal cord receives information, processes it, and produces coordinated movement. But here's an important question. How does the spinal cord know whether a muscle has been stretched? How does your body maintain posture, muscle tone, and balance, even without you thinking about it? The answer lies in a tiny but extremely important sensory receptor called the muscle spindle. In fact, Guyton dedicates several pages to the muscle spindle because it is one of the most important sensory receptors in the entire nervous system. Think of the muscle spindle as the speedometer, or stretch sensor, of a muscle. It continuously asks two important questions. How long is the muscle? And how fast is the muscle being stretched? This information is sent to the spinal cord every second, allowing the nervous system to make rapid adjustments and keep our movements smooth and accurate. In today's lecture, we'll learn where the muscle spindle is located, how it is built, its nerve supply, how gamma motor neurons control it, and why it is essential for posture, balance, and the stretch reflex. So let's begin by understanding the structure and function of the muscle spindle, the most important sensory receptor in skeletal muscle. Before we go deeper, let's quickly revise one important concept. In the last slide, we learned that the muscle spindle is the body's stretch sensor. Its job is to continuously monitor muscle length and how quickly the muscle is being stretched. Now let's understand it in more detail. First, where is the muscle spindle located? The muscle spindle is a small sensory receptor found inside skeletal muscles. It lies parallel to the ordinary muscle fibers. Remember this important point. Parallel means whenever the muscle stretches, the muscle spindle also stretches. This is why it can accurately detect changes in muscle length. Next, let's look at its structure. The muscle spindle is enclosed in a connective tissue capsule and usually contains 3 to 12 specialized muscle fibers called intrafusal fibers. These are different from the ordinary muscle fibers that produce force. The normal muscle fibers outside the spindle are called extrafusal fibers. A very easy way to remember this is extra equals outside the spindle equals produces force. Intra equals inside the spindle equals detects stretch. Finally, what does the muscle spindle do? It continuously measures muscle length and the speed of stretching, then sends this information to the spinal cord. The spinal cord immediately adjusts muscle activity, allowing smooth movement, normal muscle tone, good posture, and balance. Key takeaway: extrafusal fibers produce movement, but intrafusal fibers monitor the movement. Together, they allow precise and coordinated muscle control. Now that we know what the muscle spindle is, let's look inside it. Remember, the muscle spindle contains specialized muscle fibers called intrafusal fibers. There are two types. The first is the nuclear bag fiber. As the name suggests, many nuclei are clustered together in the center, forming a bag-like appearance. Its main job is to detect rapid changes in muscle length. In other words, it tells the nervous system how fast the muscle is being stretched. So think of it as the dynamic receptor. The second type is the nuclear chain fiber. Here, the nuclei are arranged in a straight line, like links in a chain. Its job is different. It continuously monitors the actual length of the muscle during posture and steady movements. So this is the static receptor. An easy way to remember is bag, burst, dynamic, chain, constant, static. Now, how is the muscle spindle stimulated? There are two ways. The first is the normal way. When the whole muscle is stretched, the muscle spindle is stretched at the same time because it lies parallel to the muscle fibers. This activates the sensory nerve endings and sends impulses to the spinal cord. The second way is through gamma motor neurons. Gamma motor neurons contract the ends of the intrafusal fibers, stretching the central sensory region even when the whole muscle is not being stretched. This keeps the muscle spindle active and sensitive, allowing it to continuously monitor muscle length during movement. Nuclear bag fibers detect the speed of stretch. Nuclear chain fibers detect the amount of stretch, and the muscle spindle can be activated either by stretching the whole muscle or by gamma motor neuron activation. Now that we understand the muscle spindle, let's answer an important question. Why does the brain activate gamma motor neurons during every voluntary movement? Imagine you're holding a cup of tea. Your brain activates alpha motor neurons, causing the extrafusal muscle fibers to contract and shorten. If only the extrafusal fibers contract, the muscle spindle inside the muscle becomes loose or slack. Once it becomes slack, it can no longer detect muscle stretch accurately. That means the spinal cord loses its continuous sensory feedback and movement becomes less precise. So the nervous system uses a clever solution called alpha-gamma coactivation. Whenever the brain activates alpha motor neurons, it also activates gamma motor neurons at the same time. Gamma motor neurons contract the ends of the intrafusal fibers, keeping the central sensory region of the muscle spindle stretched and sensitive. As a result, the muscle spindle continues sending information about muscle length to the spinal cord, even while the muscle is contracting. Think about holding a cup filled with hot tea. Tiny changes in muscle length happen every moment because of gravity and small hand movements. Since the muscle spindle remains active, the spinal cord continuously makes tiny corrections, allowing you to hold the cup smoothly, steadily, and without spilling it. Alpha motor neurons move the muscle. Gamma motor neurons keep the muscle spindle working. Together they produce smooth, precise, and coordinated movements. Before we move on to the stretch reflex, let's quickly review the most important points about the muscle spindle. First, remember that the muscle spindle is the stretch receptor of skeletal muscle. It lies parallel to the ordinary extrafusal muscle fibers, so whenever the muscle stretches, the spindle stretches too. Inside the spindle are intrafusal fibers, and there are two types. The nuclear bag fibers detect rapid changes in muscle length, so they are responsible for the dynamic response. The nuclear chain fibers detect the actual muscle length during steady posture, so they provide the static response. The spindle has two sensory nerve endings. The primary ending, carried by group 1A fibers, detects both the amount and the speed of stretch. The secondary ending, carried by group 2 fibers, mainly detects static muscle length. It also has two motor supplies. Alpha motor neurons contract the extrafusal muscle fibers to produce movement, while gamma motor neurons contract the intrafusal fibers, keeping the muscle spindle sensitive during muscle contraction through alpha-gamma coactivation. High yield points for exams. Remember these 4 facts. Muscle spindle equals parallel equals detects muscle stretch. Nuclear bag equals dynamic. Nuclear chain equals static. Group 1 detects velocity and length, Group 2 mainly detects length, alpha produces movement, gamma maintains spindle sensitivity. These concepts form the foundation for understanding the stretch reflex, which we'll learn in the next lecture. Welcome to one of the most important spinal reflexes in physiology, the stretch reflex, also called the myotatic reflex. Let's start with a simple example. Imagine you're standing in a moving bus. Suddenly, the driver applies the brakes. Your body moves forward, and for a moment, the muscles in your legs are rapidly stretched. But instead of falling, your muscles automatically contract, helping you regain your balance. You didn't think about it. You didn't decide to do it. It happened automatically. That automatic response is called the stretch reflex. So what exactly is the stretch reflex? It is a reflex contraction of a muscle in response to a sudden stretch of that same muscle. Its main purpose is to maintain muscle length, muscle tone, posture, and balance. Now let's look at the classic clinical example, the knee-jerk reflex. When a doctor taps the patellar tendon with a reflex hammer, the quadriceps muscle is suddenly stretched. The muscle spindle immediately detects this stretch and sends a signal through group 1A sensory fibers to the spinal cord. Inside the spinal cord, this sensory neuron makes a direct excitatory synapse with the alpha motor neuron supplying the same quadriceps muscle. The alpha motor neuron immediately sends a signal back to the muscle, causing the quadriceps to contract, and the leg kicks forward. Now let's take a deeper look at the stretch reflex and answer some very important exam questions. First, why is it called a monosynaptic reflex? The answer is simple. The sensory neuron from the muscle spindle enters the spinal cord and makes only one synapse directly with the alpha motor neuron supplying the same muscle. Since there is only one synapse, we call it a monosynaptic reflex. Second, why is it the fastest reflex in the human body? There are 3 reasons. First, it uses large group IA sensory fibers which conduct impulses very rapidly. Second, there is only one synapse, so there is almost no delay. And third, the signal does not need complex brain processing before the muscle responds. That's why the entire reflex occurs within a few milliseconds. Now let's revisit the knee jerk reflex. When the patellar tendon is tapped, the quadriceps muscle is suddenly stretched. The muscle spindle detects this stretch and sends impulses through group IA fibers to the spinal cord. The sensory neuron directly activates the alpha motor neuron, which immediately causes the same quadriceps muscle to contract. Notice an important principle. The muscle that is stretched is the muscle that contracts. This helps restore the muscle to its original length. This is an example of negative feedback. Stretching the muscle triggers a response that reduces the stretch. In other words, stretch, muscle contracts, stretch decreases. This automatic correction is essential for maintaining muscle tone, posture, balance, and stable body position. Now that we understand the stretch reflex, an important question comes up. Why does the body have two types of stretch reflexes, a dynamic reflex and a static reflex? The answer is simple. Our muscles experience two different types of stretch. Sometimes the muscle is stretched very quickly, and sometimes it is stretched slowly for a long time. Let's look at each one. First, the dynamic stretch reflex. This reflex is triggered by a rapid or sudden stretch. For example, when a doctor taps your patellar tendon with a reflex hammer, the quadriceps muscle is stretched instantly. The nuclear bag fibers inside the muscle spindle detect this rapid change in muscle length. They send powerful signals through group 1A sensory fibers, producing a strong but brief muscle contraction. Its purpose is immediate correction, to quickly oppose the sudden stretch and protect the muscle. Now, the static stretch reflex. This occurs when the muscle is stretched slowly and remains stretched. Imagine you're holding a heavy shopping bag for several minutes. Your arm muscles stay stretched continuously. Here, the nuclear chain fibers, together with some input from the bag fibers, continuously send signals to the spinal cord. The result is a long-lasting, gentle muscle contraction that helps maintain posture and muscle tone. So think of it this way. Dynamic reflex equals emergency response. It reacts immediately to sudden stretch. Static reflex equals maintenance mode. It keeps muscles contracted during prolonged stretch. Important takeaway. Dynamic equals rapid stretch equals nuclear bag fibers equals strong, brief contraction. Static equals sustained stretch equals nuclear chain fibers equals gentle, continuous contraction. Together, these two reflexes allow us to move smoothly, maintain posture, and stay balanced throughout the day. Now let's answer another important physiology question. Even when you're standing still or sitting quietly, why aren't your muscles completely relaxed? The answer is muscle tone. Muscle tone is the slight, continuous contraction present in skeletal muscles even at rest. It is not a strong contraction. It's just enough to keep your body upright, maintain posture, and keep your joints stable. So how is muscle tone produced? Even at rest, gamma motor neurons continuously fire at a low rate. This keeps the muscle spindle slightly stretched and active. The muscle spindle then sends a continuous stream of group IA sensory impulses to the spinal cord. These sensory fibers continuously stimulate alpha motor neurons, causing a small number of extrafusal muscle fibers to contract. This constant loop creates the normal muscle tone that exists in healthy muscles. Think of it as a background level of muscle activity that is always present, even when you're not consciously moving. Now imagine this stretch reflex pathway is damaged. The muscle spindle can no longer send proper signals to the spinal cord. As a result, alpha motor neuron activity decreases, the muscles become floppy and weak, muscle tone is lost, and reflexes become reduced. This condition is called hypotonia and is commonly seen in lower motor neuron lesions or diseases affecting the peripheral nerves. Congratulations! You've now mastered one of the most important spinal reflexes in physiology. Let's quickly review the entire pathway. When the patellar tendon is tapped, the quadriceps muscle is suddenly stretched. The muscle spindle immediately detects this stretch and sends impulses through group 1A sensory fibers into the spinal cord through the dorsal root. Inside the spinal cord, the sensory neuron makes a single direct synapse with the alpha motor neuron. The alpha motor neuron then sends a signal back to the same quadriceps muscle, causing it to contract and the leg to kick forward. That's why the stretch reflex is called a monosynaptic reflex, and is the fastest reflex in the human body. Remember these high-yield exam points: receptor, muscle spindle; afferent fiber, group 1A sensory fiber; integration, one synapse in the spinal cord; efferent fiber, alpha motor neuron; effector, extrafusal muscle fibers; purpose, maintain muscle tone, posture, balance, and resist sudden stretch. Finally, remember the difference between the two stretch reflexes. The dynamic stretch reflex responds to rapid stretch, such as the knee-jerk reflex, producing a quick correction. The static stretch reflex responds to sustained stretch, helping maintain posture and muscle tone during standing and everyday activities. One simple memory trick. Think of the stretch reflex like your car's suspension system. When you hit a bump, the suspension immediately absorbs the shock and keeps the car stable. In the same way, the muscle spindle detects sudden stretch, activates the stretch reflex, and automatically stabilizes your body, allowing smooth movement, balance, and posture. In our next lecture, we'll explore another important sensory receptor, the Golgi tendon organ, and learn how it protects muscles from excessive force. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.